Howdy, tubers! Welcome back for another adventure. This is the 2004 Yamaha Wolverine 4x4 350. Now, when I bought this thing, it ran, but you know, the key switch didn't work. It's got a couple of other problems, or the handlebar switch didn't work. So I have a buddy of mine who's always teasing me, stop buying new all-terrain vehicles, try to completely fix a few of the ones you have. And to that end, I'm actually going to do that. So what I did is I bought a replacement switch because while troubleshooting this one, I realized that the push button just didn't work. So after getting the new switch in and plugging it in and blowing a fuse, I said, this is interesting. Then I started to compare the switches, and I realized they probably already did this and ran across the same problem. That's why they kind of hacked it up and would have to jump the relay to get the engine to start. Anyway, with that, I started troubleshooting this, and I realized that this was miswired from whoever made it. I believe these are both China's, right? Well, I know this one's from China, and this one looks so much like it. I believe they're both from China. And once it popped the fuse, I started looking things over. And the way they had it wired, they basically swapped a couple of wires around such that when you plugged it in, as soon as you turned on the key, it ran the 12 volts right to ground and popped the fuse. Luckily, there was a fuse in there, and it didn't it didn't make the wires smolder, right? I turned the power on here, and once again, this was just shorted right to ground, and the fuse goes pop. I took it apart after that and started trying to figure things out, and basically said, let me just rewire this from scratch. What you'll see is a red wire here, red wires for power, and you'll see that basically there are 3 power leads going into this switch. Well, and the reason for that is you need this power lead for the headlights, you need this power lead for the tail light, and you need that power lead to run the starter button, the button that when you push it activates the coil to the solenoid. So I just rewired it like that. These are my connections. So when I make this hot, it goes right in like that. These wires here, the blue one's the tail light, and the other 2 are high and low for the headlight. This guy here goes out to the starter relay, and these 2 turn it off. One hooks to ground, and the other one hooks to the off button on the CDI. So they messed me up right from the beginning. There was no way this was going to work. There was no way that was going to work. And let's just call it making sense of a hacked wire harness. Now what I'm going to do, now that all this is figured out, I'm just going to start putting it together. If you really look at this circuit, let me back off. I have keys hanging down here. If you just back off a little bit, you realize you got 12 volts, you got a fuse, you got the key switch. So from here, actually from right here, is where your jack is for the handlebars, right? And once I told you that that red wire does all those connections, all I need to do is I know the high and low, so that's easy enough to hook up. I know the tail light, So that's really easy to hook up. And I have the wire identified here that engages the starter. So this is a piece of cake to hook up. What they also seem to mess up is after the key switch, you come to the neutral, reverse, and temperature lights. Those are hooked up hot right to one side of the light bulb. Those are 3 light bulbs there. And then inside the engine case, you have a thermal switch that when it goes over temperature, it closes that and the red light comes on. If you put it in reverse, it closes that switch and that light comes on. And if you close that switch, the other light goes on. So when you really stop and look at this from 18 inches, the whole thing is really pretty simple. Where things start getting weird is if there's crazy relays on some bikes and other stuff. But you wire it up like this and your life is easy. So I wired up everything. Let's go through a normal start sequence, right? 12 volts fuse. Turn the key switch on. What should happen? Well, what should happen is your neutral light should light up. Oh, perfect, right? So, right through the neutral light, and we're in all kinds of good shape. So we keep going. Next thing you're going to do is power up part of the handlebar switch, which will give you your high and low beams, right? Actually, I have the wires backward. That's high. There's low. So you guys could see that's working. And the tail light. And the tail light bulb that decided to check out just at the last moment. And finally, the key switch. So, or the starter switch. So here we have it. We managed to get it all running. This I would consider a much more difficult part of troubleshooting these things, because whoever expects to get a miswired switch in the mail, right? It's going to be interesting when I take this one. I'm going to take this one apart and spend a few minutes with it and see if it too is miswired, which means I didn't have to buy a new switch. These cost about 20 bucks, give or take a little bit. And it was the right one. Before I cut the connector off, it would have plugged right in where it should have, right? There would have been no issue with that. I'm also going to have to spend a few minutes. Yeah, it would have plugged in right there. I'm going to have to spend a few minutes because I do want to clean up the wiring. By the way, the light bulb for the neutral light was also burned out. So you can find yourself troubleshooting for a long period of time, and next thing you're wrestling with just a bad light bulb. You really have to go right back to the beginning with all this stuff, and you need to keep double checking, like, boy, that light should have come on. What's wrong? Do I have a voltage? Is my light bulb any good? Do I have a bad socket? You know, and so forth. You really have to like test and retest everything as you're going through, or as you're fooling around. If everything suddenly goes dead, you got to be thinking to yourself, if you're messing with bare wires, did you touch something and cause a short? One of the other battles I've been fighting is flooding here. It's been raining like more or less non-stop for many days. And what I have here is a French drain in front of my garage doors. When it becomes overwhelmed, the water comes into the garage, and after 3 inches or so, it goes to the door between the garage and the basement, and it slowly comes in underneath. On the far side of the house, I have a sump pit So it can come in from that side of the house too if the water table comes up. Within the sump pit, the water table, the water level came up to the point where the pump in there, and it's a new pump, was pumping 3,600 gallons per hour, right? 60 gallons per minute, and it couldn't keep up. The pump was running, water was gushing out where it should gush out on the far end of the pipe, but once again, it couldn't keep up. And in here, I put a pump that's also good for 3,600 gallons per hour. And it took a long time to finally pump down to the bare concrete floor, right? They have this garage set up so that it all collects in the center. And once again, it took a long time to pump this place out. So, you know, some people believe the weather is changing and some people do not. Since I've bought this house, I've improved the drainage ditches and drainage in the front. Then I went a year or two without flooding. Then I was having some water come up against here, so I put in the French drain, and once again I had a couple of years without flooding. Then it started to come in here. Also with the sump pit, I upgraded the pump a couple of times, up to as big a pump as I can pump through the pipes that are currently there, and it can't keep up. So obviously where I live, the water table is rising, and it's becoming a little bit more of a battle to keep up with. I think I'm just going to get to the point where anytime it rains, I'll be instantly ready to start pumping here. And I'll put a second pump and a hose that leads to lower ground into the sump pit on the side of the house and just pump the heck out of everything. And when it floods, recover quicker, right? Just set it up so that, you know, basically almost everything here you could see is up off the floor on wheels, and just make it that it's like that everywhere, that nothing is within 6 inches of the floor. It's just, you know, no use complaining. It's just the way it is. Water table's rising and old Harvey's taking on water. Noah came by with the ark and checked the hoard out. There was the hoard's up on high ground, so I didn't have to worry about any of it getting drowned. The driveway doesn't drown. I just take in water at the house. When they built this place, if they would have built it 12 inches higher, it would have made my life a lot easier. But you know, you go into the battles with rain with the house you own, not the house you wish was built. Anyway, please remember, feet down, heads up. Make sure you all get out there and enjoy each and every day. If I miss an occasional video, you know the battle I'm dealing with. Bye now, folks.